Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Julia and today's video is going to be all about my international baccalaureate experience in high school. Let's jump into it. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that everyone has a very different IB experience, and I'm going to try to tailor this video to people who might be in 9th grade, 10th grade thinking about joining IB, who are in those grades but know they want to do IB, or are currently in the IB experience. Secondly, please remember to subscribe and follow my TikTok. I post there as much as I can, and my Instagram as well. I'm currently at Northeastern University studying journalism and political science, and this is my new setup in my hotel dorm room. So go back and check out that room tour if you're curious about my college experience. So what is International Baccalaureate? Basically, IB has programs that start when you're really young and can move all the way up until high school. I started it in the middle years program that they have when I was in middle school. My school actually got certified in my 8th grade year, but we were kind of learning in that format all through 6th through 8th grade. Then when you get into 9th and 10th, it was lesser so programming. The actual IB experience that I'll be talking about is the diploma experience, and that is only 11th and 12th grade or your junior and senior year of high school. That's when I took my 6 classes and did the TOK, CAS, and EE, which I will go into later. These all culminate into the diploma that you receive if you meet all the requirements. IB is often compared to AP in the way that it transfers over into college credit on occasion, or in the way that it's kind of rigorous, but personally, in my opinion, as an IB student, I like to explain IB as taking 6 AP classes at once on top of having an essay and an extra philosophy class. I also add in that there's a community service component to it, and so it's more than just taking one off AP class and getting credit for it, whether you get a 5 or however that scoring system works. I never took AP. But rather, IB wants you to be able to put your knowledge from all 6 classes into one, and therefore the diploma program is encouraging students to kind of find the interdisciplinary connection between all 6 classes and in what they're gaining from each class. From the IBO website, they say the program aims to develop students who have an excellent breadth and depth of knowledge, students who flourish physically, intellectually, emotionally, and ethically. It's made up of 6 subject groups and the DP core comprising theory of knowledge, creativity, activity, service, and the extended essay. So now basically I'm going to break down my classes and then theory of knowledge, creativity, activity, service, and the extended essay. Before I go into these classes though, IB has different names for these classes, so I'm just going to say kind of the terms that we use in the American system. So I took IB English, IB Math, which was mostly like stats. I never actually even learned what the actual name for my math class was, but I think it was something like applications and interpretations or something like that. It wasn't really challenging, but that's besides the point. Then I took IB Global Politics, which is exactly how it sounds. I took IB History, which was specifically on 20th century history, and we focused on authoritarian governments and that kind of realm. I took IB Biology, and then my last class I took actually sophomore junior year instead of junior senior year, and that was IB Spanish. So I got a test out of that early, so I knew early on in the program my predicted score came out at the beginning of my junior year, which I'll talk about later, and then I got my final score by the end of the junior year, at the beginning of COVID. IB allows you to take up to 4 of those classes as HL classes. I took 3 HL, or high level, and 3 standard level, or SL. The classes I took as high level classes were biology, English, and global politics, and then that left Spanish, math, and history as my standard level classes. Looking back, I wish I had taken history as higher level because the difference between the testing in the two isn't really all that much. And I actually had a friend who did it, and she didn't have to do anything different because of COVID. It was the same requirement for HL and SL. The difference between the two is I cannot get credit for those 3 SL classes. So coming into college, I can get credit for my first year writing class from English, my international relations class from global politics, and my biology credit comes from that biology class, but I can't move forward in any Spanish, math, or any history because I took them as SL courses. That's one major flaw I find in the IB system, is that colleges don't recognize credit unless you took it at an HL level. And really the difference comes when you take the test, but the learning in my school at least was really similar between the two courses, and HL and SL students could be in the same class. It was just when it came to testing that it was different. And I think that's one flaw in giving college credit, is we still worked really hard in those SL classes and then we're not getting college credit for them. It is state law where I'm from that they have to give credit for a 4 or above in an SL course. The grading scale in IB is out of 7. So basically 4 being average, and then 3 or below is considered failing. I would say like 6s and 7s are really rare. Like if you get a 7 on a test, like everyone is taken aback because 7s are so rare. Personally, my school didn't let us choose what subjects we wanted to take in IB outside of your language and outside of one elective course. My elective was that history course, and then of course I chose Spanish. I would say if you're given the choice to take classes, I would choose something that you're personally interested in, not something that you think is going to give you more college credit or such. Because honestly, I just chose history because I loved learning about it and had the teacher before. And I had a really great time in that class and met a lot of great people, and still have in contact with people who were in that class just because we loved history. As far as language, obviously choose the one that you are most confident in. I chose Spanish because I took it in middle school and then I got into 9th and 10th grade, and it just made sense to keep going with it. There is something called the ab initio program though, which basically starts you on a fast track for 2 years in any language. My school only offered it in Spanish and Chinese, I believe. So you could just start Spanish for the first time in junior year, and then they would fast track you through for your 2-year program experience. Basically, my school did predicted scores in October of the year that you're testing in May. So, for example, in junior year, they gave predicted scores in October for my Spanish test that was in May. I had a 5 as my predicted score, and I received a 5 at the end of my junior year. In my senior year, our predicted scores likewise came out in October, and then I took the test in the end. The way that my experience was different though was we were in COVID for both my junior and senior year testing, and my school was a non-in-person test school when IB was going through testing. So the way it worked was we had internal assessments that we were graded on, and our predicted scores were sent to the IB graders. So they were looking at projects and papers that we had put together over the year that would initially be added to our test score that we would take, but rather we just were exempt from the test, and they just gave us our scores in IB from those internal assessments. So to go through my predicted scores, I had 4s as my predicted scores for English and for math. I had 5s as predicted scores for history, biology, and global politics. In the end, I ended up receiving 5s and 6s. I had 5s in global politics, biology, and history, and I had 6s in English and math. I honestly was not expecting for it to be that way of a flip, where my predicted scores were 4s in those English and math classes, and I ended up getting 6s. The IB system's really just hard to predict. I don't know how they took the predicted scores and the internal assessments and really produced these scores for students this year. I couldn't really tell you much about the algorithm. I know on a normal year you would take the test and you would kind of get the score that would make sense for what your point range was. But here we are. So those are the scores that I received on my IB exams. To now go into the theory of knowledge in CAS and EE requirements. Theory of knowledge is basically a philosophy class that they make you take when you are in the diploma program. It adds in on top of your 6 classes that you're taking. We had to take it at 8 a.m. when I was in my junior year, and then we kind of just took it in the afternoon during study hall periods and such once we got into COVID. It was kind of a weird class because there's no really end goal. Like, you have to do one project and you have to do one paper, and that's really how you're graded in the class. It's not a huge commitment. I found it pretty easy, and so did my friends. It's more of a tedious kind of class where they trying to get you to think deeper into the connections between maybe your English and your math class or your global politics and your biology class. And so it's just a way of trying to integrate your knowledge. My class put it as a pass-fail class on our actual transcripts that were sent to colleges, and it wasn't a super high pressure situation. Creativity Activity Service, or CAS as we called it in my school, is actually a service component along with kind of getting the students to be active and creative in a sense. I found it okay. I liked the service component because I'm really big into volunteer, and I started my own community service group in high school. So that was actually kind of how I did my CAS experience. They ask you to keep a log of your creativity and your activity. So if you're like, for me being a dancer, I'd put down my activity for the week on dance, or I would put down how I went out in my community and did activism as part of my service. So it was kind of just a mumbo jumbo of how they kept track of you being a member of your society and staying creative and active and such. That was also put as pass-fail in our transcripts, and basically you just get the credit from IB for it, and it helps you get your diploma. Finally, the extended essay, or what we called EE. Basically, this essay spanned from our January of our junior year to the January of our senior year. We had to write about anything of our choosing. I chose English as the subject I was writing within. So I wrote about musicals and how musicals speak to today's society and the activism and social justice movements. I really liked my essay. I was pretty proud of it. Overall, it was pretty painless. There were some deadlines to meet, like 2,000 words by the end of our junior year. The total word count you could have at the end of the essay in your final draft was 4,000 words. I think with having a year to write 4,000 words, it wasn't all too bad. It's not great to add on top of your 6 classes in your TOK and your CAS, but I kind of just got through it. Really what mattered to me in the IB process were those 6 classes, because obviously that's the bulk of what gives you your points. But the 3 other components were pretty painless. I hear a lot of complaints about TOK and the EE, but honestly, in my own experience, it wasn't that bad. I think if you're just able to be patient and get the work done, that you'll just get through it in a breeze. Of course, I speak from a very different place, coming from it being in a COVID year, both of my testing years. But I think that overall I got the experience of being in those classes and having the teachers and the EE and the CAS and the TOK. Overall, my advice would be to stay really focused and be really dedicated and want it. Part of the reason they give you those predicted scores is to see if you're gonna reach the program's requirements in the end. But I have seen people who've started out with 3s in their predicted scores and still got the diploma in the end because they saw and it motivated them. You do put down a big deposit of $1,000 in shortly thereafter getting your scores, and so it is a question of whether you want to pay that and risk not getting the diploma. 2, I would really recommend working with your teachers if you are falling behind in a class. IB is very focused on getting through every required module and every scheduled test and mile marker, and so the teacher can't just slow down necessarily. At times they may readjust their schedule, but IB has a requirement for when IAs are due and when they want to see your predicted scores and so on and so forth. So teachers aren't going to necessarily want to hold back the class if they need to get these things into IB. I personally spent a lot of our study hall times going to teachers' classrooms and clarifying questions from class. Also, because you're taking a test at the end of a 2-year experience, you want to be able to remember everything from the beginning of your junior year, which is very overwhelming. So I would recommend checking back in at the end of your junior year and putting together all of the important things from that year, because I know a lot of people tend to just throw away a lot of papers at the end of the year, but you need to make sure you hold on to that stuff in order to take those tests at the end of the year. My final suggestion is to not compare with other people who are in your school doing the IB diploma program. Everyone's kind of taking different courses, everyone's kind of at a different place, has different fortes. I personally was not that strong in biology, or in math, and comparing with people who were in HL math and I was in SL just wasn't good for me, because they were going to be at a very different place in a very different time and get different scores because they're not in your same course. So just be careful who you're comparing with and how you're doing that, because really it's your own experience and you can get the IB diploma if you put in the hard work for it, and everyone's going to get there in their own different way. Finally, the question of the day: would I do it again? I would say if I were to do IB again, I would not want to do it in a COVID year. I think that there's value in not having to take that test at the end of the year, but also you're losing the fact that you did 2 years of really hard work and you don't even get a cumulative experience. That's one other perspective that I've heard from a couple students, and I would kind of agree with. I'm not a great test taker, so I think that COVID worked in my favor in that way, but also it was just really hard to contact teachers and really hard to stay on top of work when you're doing online school, as many of us have experienced. So overall, I would do it again if I could have the full experience of being able to meet with teachers and not have the barriers or constraints of COVID. I do think now being here for my first couple weeks of college, it's nice not having to take first year writing or an introduction to international relations class, but I don't know how much it really helped me because I couldn't even take the class after international relations right now, and so it really isn't as worth it as I thought it would be. It is nice being able to skip biology though, because really the way that the Northeastern program works is I've covered a lot of the science and I won't have to take another science class. I might just have to take one math class and I think I'll be set. So that's really good in my favor because I didn't really like science or math. It wasn't my forte, and so I would say it was worth it in that matter, and I would do it again just for that. Overall, I wish that colleges would look more at how credit can transfer the way that AP does. I really dedicated my last 2 years of high school to taking 6 AP classes over a continuous time, and to not get credit for 3 of them is kind of infuriating. I wouldn't want to do TOK or the EE or CAS again. It was just too overwhelming on top of everything, and I didn't feel like I got a whole lot out of some of the experiences in those classes or in those programs. But overall, I would recommend it to people if they're kind of into that interdisciplinary learning, or they're looking for a way to dedicate their high school time, put something down on their resume, and get college credit for at least 3 or 4 of those classes. Anyway, let me know if you have any more questions about my IB experience. I kind of just scratched the surface on a lot of stuff here, so leave them down in the comments or comment on my TikToks or Instagram. Happy to help. I also keep my DMs open, so feel free to message me there. As always, remember to subscribe and follow me on my socials. They'll be in the description box below. Please like this video if you'd like to see more advice from my high school experience, or if you want to see any more college related content, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!